Operation Nimrod, the Iranian Embassy Siege, 1980. Location: the Iranian Embassy, South Kensington, London. On May 5, 1980, the world witnessed a spectacular hostage rescue mission in the Iranian Embassy in London. After 5 days of the hostage crisis, the rescue action was conducted by the famous British unit trained for special tasks, the Special Air Service, better known as the SAS. The action, known as Operation Nimrod, was an example of a superb counter-terrorist operation, as it resulted in 5 of the 6 terrorists being eliminated and 1 captured, and only 1 casualty among the 26 hostages during the assault. The Iranian Embassy siege began on Wednesday, April 30, 1980, when 6 members of the so-called Democratic Revolutionary Front for the Liberation of Arabistan, or DRFLA, stormed the Iranian embassy at 16 Princes Gate, South Kensington, London, UK. The reason behind the attack was because of the oppression of the Arab population in the oil-wealthy province of Khuzestan, or Arabistan as it was called by the Arabs, by the new Iranian regime led by Ayatollah Khomeini. The attack on the embassy in London was to get the attention of the world, and especially Arab countries, towards their issue. The terrorists arrived in London 1 month earlier, on March 31st. The leader of the group was Oan Ali Mohammed, or Salim Tokay, an Arab political activist from Iran, and the only member of the group that spoke English. During the 1-month preparation, the terrorists equipped themselves with weapons that were smuggled into the United Kingdom, likely via an Iraqi diplomatic shipment. Oan and his associates were armed with 2 Polish-made Scorpion machine pistols, 3 Browning HP-35 pistols loaded with 9mm Winchester hollow-point ammunition, 1 .38 caliber revolver, and several Soviet RGD-5 grenades. Day 1. At 11:25 hours, the group slammed the door and captured the police constable Trevor Locke from the Diplomatic Protection Group. Constable Locke had his radio taken, but only after he managed to press the panic button without being noticed, sending an emergency signal to Scotland Yard. Besides, he managed to keep his .38 caliber revolver secret from the terrorists. In just a few minutes, the terrorists took control of the entire building, taking 26 hostages. 17 of them were Iranian members of the embassy staff. 8 of them were visitors and Constable Locke. Among the visitors were 2 BBC employees, Sim Harris and Chris Kramer. The hostages were gathered and Oan declared their demands: autonomy for Arabistan, the release of 91 Arab prisoners from Iranian prisons, as well as a plane to fly themselves and the hostages out of the UK. The deadline to meet the demands was set to noon, May 1st, under the threat that the whole embassy would be blown up. Alerted by the panic button on Constable Locke's radio, the Metropolitan Police responded immediately. In just a few minutes, Deputy Assistant Commissioner John Dello appeared in front of the embassy and established an improvised command post in his car. As the situation developed, the post was moved to the building of the Royal School of Needlework and then to the nearby Montessori Nursery School. The first thing the police did after sealing the area was to establish a contact with Oan via the field telephone that was dropped inside the embassy. The field telephone was chosen as it would continue to record conversations even when it was not being used. Metropolitan Police Chief Inspector Max Vernon became the negotiator on the other end. Soon after, the place was filled with an entire army of journalists and TV crews. The British authorities quickly became aware of the seriousness of the situation. A crisis management team gathered in the Cabinet Office briefing room, also known as COBR, chaired by William Whitelaw, the Home Secretary, as the Prime Minister, Margaret Thatcher, was unavailable. COBR agreed that the police were to lead the negotiations, but in case of hostages being harmed, the army would step in. That is, the SAS would commence a military assault. Even though the peaceful solution was the top priority, the British government was determined not to give in to the terrorists, and in no case allow them to flee the country. The British also had to count on the fact that there wasn't the slightest possibility that the Iranian government would give in to the terrorist demands. The Iranian government was also eager to use the situation in their favor and to portray the captured embassy personnel as martyrs. In the afternoon, the hostage-takers would release an ill hostage, Frida Mozaffarian, a press officer. Day 2. On May 1st, 2 SAS teams, red and blue, arrived at the Regent's Park's barracks in white Range Rovers and then they moved into the building at number 14 through 15 that belonged to the Royal College of General Practitioners that was next door to the embassy. To remain unnoticed, the SAS sneaked into the building through back alleys under the cover of night. The other building right next to the terrorists, the residence of the Ethiopian embassy, was occupied by MI5 technicians who were assigned to eavesdrop on the terrorists. They did it with the help of microphones put inside holes in walls they drilled with small hand drills. As a distraction for the noise they made by the drills, passenger aircraft landing at Heathrow were redirected to fly at a low altitude over the embassy. Inside the embassy, Owen was having difficulty with another ill hostage, Chris Kramer. Since his condition was worsening with each passing minute and police were not willing to send in a doctor, Owen had no choice but to release him. The first thing Chris Kramer did once he was free was to give information to the police about the hostage takers. The most important moment of the day was noon, when the deadline was set for the Arab prisoners to be released. However, as nothing happened, Owen postponed the deadline to 1400 hours. The British authorities were certain that Owen was not ready to fulfill his threats and intentionally let the second deadline pass as well. After the second deadline passed, it became evident that they were right. Owen also realized that his demands were never going to be met and decided to change them. His new demands were that 3 ambassadors from 3 Arab countries, Iraq, Jordan, and Algeria, should come and serve as mediators for the terrorists' safe passage from the UK. Day 3. The third day of the hostage crisis brought about nothing but new demands, set by Owen, otherwise he would kill Abdul Fazi Azati, the cultural attaché. Since the police refused to reinstall previously cut-off telephone and telex lines, Owen asked for a man from the BBC who knew Harris, one of his hostages, to dictate him his demands. At 1500 hours, Tony Crabb, editor of BBC TV News, arrived to note down Owen's demands. These were: the arrival of 1 Arab ambassador as negotiator, a coach for the terrorists, hostages, and ambassador to be taken to Heathrow Airport, for non-Iranian hostages to be released at the airport, and finally an aircraft to take the terrorists, ambassador, and the rest of the hostages to one of the Arab countries, presumably Iraq, where the remaining hostages would be released. Owen requested that these demands should be broadcast by the BBC on the evening news. Later that evening, BBC Radio only briefly broadcasted the terrorists' demands and even misinterpreted them. Owen was furious. Day 4. At 06:05 hours on May 3rd, Owen yelled at Vernon via the field telephone line about being cheated. He demanded Tony Crabb from the BBC to return in order to take new notes on his demands, or a hostage would be killed. This time, the police had no choice but to give in to Owen's demands. At 15:30 hours, Crabb appeared, and after being reprimanded by his hostage friend Harris, he took notes exactly as Owen told him. Police negotiator Vernon ensured Owen his demands would be broadcasted in his exact words. In return, he asked Owen to release 2 hostages, which he agreed. As arranged, the first hostage, a pregnant woman named Hayat Kanji, was released before the demands were broadcasted by the BBC radio, and the second, Ali Guil Gunsafar, a Pakistani tourist, was released after the news. Demands were broadcasted by Scotland Yard's head of information, word for word. Even though the police seemed to have things under control, preparations for the military assault were still in progress. At 2300 hours, an SAS team moved quietly across the rooftops to reach the roof of the Iranian embassy. Once there, they spotted a skylight that could serve as a potential entry point. On the back end of the roof, SAS soldiers secured the abseil ropes for entry through the windows. Day 5. Broadcasting their demands was a small victory for the terrorists and definitely improved their mood. On day 5 of the siege, they received the news that the Arab ambassadors agreed to meet the British in order to solve the crisis. As a sign of goodwill, they let another hostage go, the journalist Mustafa Karkuti. COBR, on the other hand, didn't have any hopes that the crisis would end in a peaceful manner. The SAS made detailed plans to storm the embassy and were ready to drop in at any moment.